Now, an Islamic Center of North America news conference on U.S. attitudes toward Muslims and the proposed Islamic Center in New York City, near Ground Zero. Speakers include leaders from the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths. This is a little more than an hour.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Ingrid Mattson. I am president of the Islamic Society of North America. We are gathered here together today, distinguished faith leaders of various denominations across Christianity and American Judaism, to discuss, meet today to discuss what we have considered to be a very alarming trend in a rise in anti-Muslim bigotry in this country. It is a time that challenges Americans to decide whether we're going to live up to our values, the values of religious freedom and tolerance that has really been a hallmark of American society for so long. I feel very privileged and honored to have such distinguished faith leaders come here today to meet with us, to stand with us, to assert their belief in the importance of fulfilling this American promise and these principles. I'm particularly grateful to my Jewish colleagues who are very busy entering a time of the Jewish holy days and have many things to do in preparation for that. So I'm very grateful for them in particular for joining us today. Let me just say a few brief words about the climate that we find ourselves in today. I understand that there is a great deal of misunderstanding about Islam and about Muslims in this country. And I do not blame ordinary Americans who are very busy and do not have a lot of information for feeling confused and anxious. It is our job to help provide them with better information about what Muslims believe and what Islam is. What I do find disturbing and alarming is the fact that there are some people who are using that lack of knowledge and that anxiety for ideological purposes, either because politically or religiously they simply do not like Muslims. And they are fomenting dislike and hatred against Muslims in this country in a way that's very alarming. Having spoken to many families across the country over the last few weeks, I have heard many Muslim Americans say that they have never felt this anxious or this insecure in America since directly after September 11th. They're nervous about their children as they head back to school this week, that when they go to school that they're going to face people who are looking at them as aliens, when in fact they are citizens who are born in this country. They're afraid about going out in public. There have been a number of incidents of harassment of just ordinary people going about doing their daily business, and that's not something that we want to see grow and continue. Freedom of religion is, as I say, a hallmark of this country. The Muslims who immigrated to the United States, many of them came here for religious freedom, because even if they were in the majority in their country, perhaps they were of the wrong sect or the wrong expression of Islam. And so we know what it means to live in an environment where that freedom is taken away. And that is why, as American Muslims, we also have been very assiduous in the last number of years working with our colleagues to make sure that we use the freedom that we have in this country to also promote religious freedom and liberty as a principle of Islam. It is why we have signed the Common Word document and engaged in that as a principle of religious freedom, respect, and reciprocity between Christians and Muslims. It's why we've engaged with our Jewish colleagues in education of our congregations about each other's faith so that there is not distortion of what Jews are and what they believe and what Judaism is on the part of Muslims. So this is something that we're committed to. And We want to make sure that we're able to continue to fulfill this role, which is unique in the world. American Muslims have a unique ability to be this bridge and to show the Muslims who do not live in this kind of freedom that an open, pluralistic atmosphere where there are diverse religions living together can really be good for everyone. With that introduction, I would like to introduce my colleague, Rabbi David Saperstein, who's the Executive Director of the Religion Action Network of the Union for Reform Judaism, to say a few words.
I know, like Dr. Michael Kinnamon, who is the General Secretary of the National Council of Churches of Christ, we're really honored to have co-sponsored, to have co-hosted this with the Islamic Society of North America. And we commend both Ingrid Mattson and Dr. Saeed for the extraordinary work that they did in putting this together on such short notice. We are all in their debt. As for those of us who are Jews who are part of this undertaking, both the ones who are here, Jewish leaders who are here, and some who couldn't be because of the proximity of the holiday, but were part of the preparation for this, we could be nowhere else. We have been the quintessential victims of religious persecution and discrimination throughout history. We know what it is like when people have attacked us verbally, have attacked us physically, and others have remained silent. It cannot happen here in America in 2010 without the response of the religious community. And we speak out because we know that hate crimes and hate speech are not mere acts of disreputable talk, of murder or assaults or arsons or derisive conversation or desecrations. They're attacks on the pillars of our republic and the guarantors of our freedom. Such actions, such speech are a betrayal of the promise of America. They erode our national well-being. And those who commit those crimes do so fully intending to pull apart the two often frayed threads of diversity that should bind us together and that makes us strong. These people seek to divide and conquer. They do damage to America across the globe. They do damage to us internally. They seek to tear us apart from within, pitting American against American, fomenting violence, civil discord. And we stand here to say that is not who we are as Americans and as religious leaders. That is not what we are about. It is not what our religions are about, and it is not what this nation is about. We have released now a statement on behalf of all of us who are gathered here. We know it represents the sentiments and commitments of religious leaders throughout America. I believe you have copies, or if you don't yet, they are available on the way out. It was a powerful experience shaping this statement. We came in focused on core issues of religious liberty and realized as we talked about this moment that Dr. Mattson has so poignantly and urgently described, that we had to speak more directly to the anti-Muslim bigotry that is going on across America today. And in reshaping the statement, it was focused on that. And I'm going to call on two of our distinguished members of our group, Dr. Gerald Durley, who is the pastor of Providence Missionary Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and a well-known figure going back to the early days of the Civil Rights Movement here in the United States. And Dr. Nancy Fuchs-Kreimer. Rabbi Kreimer is a professor who specializes in intergroup relations at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And it is my pleasure to call on them now to read three brief excerpts from the statement that has been issued.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Saperstein. What an honor and a privilege it is for me, having stood on the Mall 47 years ago under similar circumstances where we were talking about liberty and justice for all. The statement that we've worked together collectively reads thusly: Religious leaders denounce anti-Muslim bigotry and call for respect for America's tradition of religious liberty. As religious leaders in this great country, we have come together in our nation's capital to denounce categorically the derision, misinformation, and outright bigotry being directed against America's Muslim community. We bear a sacred responsibility to honor America's varied faith traditions and to promote a culture of mutual respect and the assurance of religious freedom for all. In advance of the 9th anniversary of the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, 2001, we announce a new era of interfaith cooperation.
Thank you. We are profoundly distressed and deeply saddened by the incidents of violence committed against Muslims in our communities and by the desecration of Islamic houses of worship. We stand by the principle that to attack any religion in the United States is to do violence to the religious freedom of all Americans. The threatened burning of copies of the Holy Quran this Saturday is a particularly egregious offense that demands the strongest possible condemnation of all who value civility in public life and seek to honor the memory of those who lost their lives in September 11th. As religious leaders, we are appalled by such disrespect for a sacred text that for centuries has shaped many of the great cultures of our world and that continues to give spiritual comfort to more than 1 billion Muslims today.
We are convinced that spiritual leaders representing the various faiths in the United States have a moral obligation to stand together and to denounce categorically derision, misinformation, or outright bigotry directed against any religious group in this country. Silence, silence, silence is not an option. Only by taking this stand can spiritual leaders fulfill the highest calling of our respective faiths and thereby help to create a safer and stronger America for all of our people.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to call up the Reverend Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who's the Archbishop Emeritus of Washington. We were together last in Rome, where we both signed a document, a statement after meeting to discuss the Common Word document in which we supported international religious freedom, freedom for religious minorities everywhere in the world. I was very honored to be with him there for that week in Rome and also to join him today.
Dr. Masson, thank you. I'm honored to be here. I'm really representing Archbishop Welton Gregory, who's the Archbishop of Atlanta, who was the chairman of the work of the Catholic Bishops' Conference on interfaith relations. So I'm delighted that I have a chance to be with you. I would say to my brother that I was there 47 years ago too, and when Dr. Martin Luther King spoke so beautifully, that's one of the memories that you never forget, because that was such a powerful moment in the history of our country. This is another powerful moment, or it's a moment that calls for a powerful response. And I think that's what my brothers and sisters here have been doing, to give a prayerful and yet a firm and yet a constant response. And that's what we need. This is where we are. I want to say just two things. First of all, why are we doing this? Well, I think for two reasons. First of all, we're doing it because we have to do it. I don't think we have a choice. I think that document that was just read, talking about the responsibility of religious leaders, is a document that really tells the story. Religious leaders cannot stand by in silence when things like this are happening, when things like this are affecting the so many good, wonderful people around our country who have brought Islam to these shores and who are playing a role in our society which is constructive and which is excellent. I think we have to reach out to them and say, look, we're happy you're here. We love you, and we understand that that you're bearing false witness against your neighbor is against the Quran, is against the Bible, is against the Gospels, and this is why we are here. So we have to be here. I think there's another reason. The other reason is that I have the great fear that the story of bigotry, the story of hatred, the story of animosity to others is going to be taken by some to be the story of the real America, and it's not. This is not America. This is not our country. And we have to make sure that our country is known around the world as a place where liberty of religion, where respect for your neighbor, where love for your neighbor, where these things are the most prominent in our society. America was not built on hatred. America was built on love. And if we get away from that, and if we try to give that message out to the world, it's the wrong message. Our message is a message of working together, working for each other, taking care of the person who needs help, and making sure that we try to live everybody together in a good and holy life. That's what America is, and that's the message that I pray that we will get out to all the people of the world so that they will know who we are and who we're trying to be. So it's a great joy for me and a great privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Cardinal McCarrick. Next, we'll hear from Reverend Richard Cizik, who is the president of the new Evangelical Partnership for the Common Good, truly visionary leader.
Thank you for inviting me, Ingrid. Cardinal McCarrick and my distinguished colleagues. We represent one of the largest constituencies that America has. That is the religious constituency with all of its breadth that you see here, from Roman Catholic to mainline Protestant to Evangelical, Muslim, Orthodox. We are all here. And we're here together to say what has already been said, namely that we are governed in this country by a constitution whose First Amendment guarantees the free exercise of religion. And governments at every level have understood that they have to respect that right, from the largest cities of our nation, such as New York, to the smallest, such as Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Protection of religious liberty is what evangelical Christians most of all have come to appreciate. It is the one practice I think is most exceptional about America. And by the way, millions have come here through the centuries because of it, including millions of evangelical Christians. Now we know that the controversy that began at Part 51, you see, has become Exhibit A in this contest between popular passion and constitutional principle. But that contest has moved into the smallest of communities around America. And I'm here to say on behalf of my community, the evangelical constituency of America, that those mainly conservative Christians who are responding to their Muslim brothers and sisters, their fellow Americans, with anti-Muslim bigotry or hatred, they are openly rejecting, you see, the First Amendment principles of religious liberty, which we as evangelical Christians benefit daily. And to those who would exercise derision, you see, bigotry, open rejection of our fellow Americans for their religious faith, I say, shame on you. As an evangelical, I say to those who do this, I say, you bring dishonor to the name of Jesus Christ. You directly disobey his commandment to love our neighbor. You violate the command, you see, not to bear false witness. And not least of all, you drive the watching world further away from any interest in our gospel message. Lastly, let me say one more thing. Watch out for so casually trampling on the religious liberty of others. You may be able to do that when you are the majority. But if you undermine liberty for other people's children today, your own children may one day see their religious liberties deprived from them. And the principles that protect Muslims today here in this country will protect Christians, Jews, and others tomorrow. And that's what makes this a great, great country. I thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cizik. Now we'd like to hear from Dr. Michael Kinnamon, who's the General Secretary of the National Council of Churches.
Thank you, Dr. Mattson. I'm the General Secretary of the National Council, but I'm pleased to say that behind me this afternoon are representatives or heads of a number of our member churches. The National Council is an umbrella group comprised of 36 of the major denominations in this country. And behind me are leaders in the Greek Orthodox, the Armenian Orthodox, the Episcopal, Methodist, Lutheran, Baptist, and other communions. And together we want to say as strongly as we possibly can that we identify ourselves with the statement, excerpts of which you just heard, that we denounce the kind of anti-Muslim bigotry which we see across the country, certain parts of the country at this moment, and we identify ourselves strongly with the call for religious tolerance and acceptance. We believe at the National Council of Churches that the diversity of this country strengthens our faith, that we are made deeper and richer in our own Christian commitment by virtue of the relationships that we have with the Muslim and Jewish communities, and it's a great pleasure and an honor to be with those colleagues at this meeting today. I want to say that at this meeting, we, as you heard, adopted a statement which we present to you that we hope will be read across the country, perhaps in congregations, in mosques and synagogues. But we also talked about next steps that we could take as communities of faith to carry this word even farther beyond these walls and these organizations. We talked, for example, about calling on our networks, our constituencies, to replicate this kind of meeting in local settings across the country, so that what happens now in Washington at a national level will happen also in targeted cities. And we talked about how we might do that using our own media networks, and also thanks to you. We believe that for example, at the National Council of Churches, we have made national statements that call for acceptance of Muslim neighbors and have spoken out as strongly as we can about the issues you've heard today. But we also have called on state councils of churches, including, for example, in Florida, to initiate activities in their own communities that will say no to this kind of bigotry. And we're getting a response already. We hope that that will continue into the future. So that was a part of the meeting today, not simply to stop with the statement, although it responds to the moment and must be heard, but also to carry that word of education and hope into the future by calling on local communities, our own networks, to replicate it. I want to say only one other word. You heard this from Reverend Cizik, and I appreciated so much his comments. Christians in the West have often been responsible for the kind of intolerant rhetoric that we now hear from various places in this country. So it's important for us as a Christian community to say an unequivocal no. That is not who we are. Our own faith calls on us to bear not false witness, but true witness, and that means to speak out on behalf of Islam, for example, as a peace-loving and peace-teaching faith, and to say that these are indeed our brothers and sisters. But I want to add only one other word. At the National Council, we also know that there are minority Christian communities around the world now that also feel themselves to be threatened by extremist voices in situations that are predominantly Muslim, because extremists in those settings may use the rhetoric in this country as a pretext. And so it also is in Christian self-interest to speak out strongly now a word of tolerance knowing that our Muslim colleagues in other places are doing the same on behalf of minority Christian communities there. We live in an interdependent world. It is very important that we speak this word of interfaith acceptance, hospitality together. Thank you.
We'll take questions and answers, or questions in 1 minute. Let me just say quickly, just following on Reverend Kinnamon's point. For the last 9 years, Muslim Americans have been trying to get the message out that we reject the extremists, Muslim extremists' view of Islam, their justifications for violence, their justifications for militancy. And it's been very difficult for people to hear that message because the actions and statements of the extremists are more dramatic and they get more attention. And we have had our friends in the Christian community and in the Jewish community consistently support us in saying, these are mainstream Muslims. The majority of Muslims that we know are law-abiding, are ethical, good people. And I just want to say, for whatever international audience there may be now, for any Muslims in other parts of the world that are listening, yes, you may have heard some of the loud voices of some Christian extremists and others in this country who hate Islam, who hate Muslims, who are making very hurtful statements. But they do not represent America. They do not represent Christianity or Judaism. These people who are here with us today represent the true values and views of the vast majority of American Jews and Christians and just American citizens. So don't use these incidents, as hateful as they are, as hurtful as they are, to justify any kind of hatred against America or Christians, American Christians or Jews. With that, I'd like to open the floor for some questions.
If I can ask...
Please identify yourself.
Sure. Scott Thuman from ABC7 News. Cardinal, if I
Scott,
can ask you...
we'll get you right next, okay? I'm sorry, Adele Banks from here.
Hi, Adele Banks from Religion News Service. Sorry, good to see all of you. I was just wondering if anybody else could speak to other next steps and also a little bit about what happened at this meeting, how many of you were there, how long it took to come up with the statement. But I'm also wondering about specific other next steps besides the ones that were mentioned. Thank you.
Okay.
In terms of the next steps, my name is Reverend Richard Killmer, Killmer. I'm the Executive Director of the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. We've been concerned since our founding in 2006 that the victims of U.S.-sponsored torture have been Muslims. One of the next steps that has been discussed is the possibility of another meeting like this one, but much larger, with people of various faiths across the country coming together to talk about what are the real strategies we need to do together to end this anti-Muslim bigotry. Because it's the people who are in the pews who have the potential for having the most power, or have the potential for bringing about the kinds of changes that we want to. So to bring those folks together, soon we hope, 4 months perhaps, to come together, to hold hands, to figure out what strategies we need now to make sure that this blight on Americans' spirit and soul dissipates. Thank you.
Colonel McCarrick, if I can ask you, Scott Thuman from... We got it now?
No. The other way, Scott. You're not going to get it.
It's on. That's as good as we're going to get, I think. I'll be loud enough. Cardinal McCarrick, if you might, so much of the past 24 hours, the talk has been about what's planned in Florida with this burning of the Quran. And at the same time, with the response that we've heard from General Petraeus, where he has indicated that it could perhaps put military overseas in harm's way even greater were this video to go worldwide, as it most likely would. What is your concern about the potential danger to our men and women overseas as a result of this? And also, what does it say about interfaith relations right now?
Well, that was one of the reasons why I said we need to get the right message out. We need to get the message out that this is not a country where these things happen by by the majority of people. These are and the acts of very small extremist people who feel they're doing the right thing, I'm sure, but who have taken themselves out totally from the mainstream of what is Christianity or what is Judaism or what is Islam today. And so that I think it is important that we get the message out as clearly as we can. That's why I spoke to that. I think this is what's the real America. This is not the real America, and it never has been, and it never should be. And so one thing that we are doing in this document is saying, well, this is what we believe is the real America. It is a place where religions are respected. If there's the old saying that you attack one religion, you attack them all. I think this is true. We are all believers, or people who do not believe in anything. They have the right. We're not happy with them, but they have the right to exist and not to be attacked by others. And so this is the first point, that basically we want the message to get out to people all around the world that the real America is a country that is open, is guaranteeing freedom of religion and everything else that you need to live a good life. With regard to what the General said, if he's correct, then we're really in trouble, because if somebody does something like this, it will create all kinds of problems all over the world, and I think we must be aware of that. And some of our own people are going to be hurt by this. It won't be their fault, but they happen to be Americans. They happen to be Christians. They happen to be Jews. So I think there's another reason why we should say to these people, be careful what you do, not just because it's the wrong thing to do, but because you can do more harm to your fellow Americans in dangerous areas around the world.
In response to the last two questions, one of the things that we did also at the table was to identify best practices that are going on in our local communities. What are we doing to promote interfaith relations in various places? Dr. Durley, for example, shared with us how Muslim, Jewish, Christian leaders have taken trips overseas together and developed a statement of principles that guide their actions. Part of the problem is that we have not shared these things widely enough. We've taken them for granted, and we've assumed that if we do it locally, that's enough. No, now we're realizing that we need to be able to share these with one another, that the word about interfaith relations, tolerance, dialogue will be lifted up as the dominant voice and not simply hidden in ways that we may have done too much of in the past.
Just one more quick word about the question of Florida. Obviously, not a surprise, behind the scenes, there's a lot of discussion going on to try and persuade the people organizing this to abandon the idea. And if it fails, all across the country, there are coalitions that will be out protesting for mutual respect and diversity and religious freedom and liberty here in America. A lot depends on you. It is certainly a valid news story if a sacred book is burnt. But it is also a valid news story when good people of conscience representing the vast majority of Americans gather together to denounce it and to say it has no place in American life. And if you accurately portray that in a balanced way that shows both sides of it, it will be a significant constructive step towards lifting up the truth in terms of what America is and where the religious communities of America are.
Rabbi, there are 50 people
Yes.
in that church. Why not have...
No, you don't have the mic. Go ahead.
Heidi Noonan, Fox News. Cardinal McCarrick, just wondering, are you planning to speak to Pastor Jones personally on this issue?
I don't know the gentleman. I certainly am open. I'm open to do that. Probably would be better if someone from his own religious community spoke to him, because he probably will feel that I have a different faith or a different point of view on things. Be happy to do it, but I think that if I get some of my friends from the evangelical community who are equally troubled as I am by what they're going to do, I think that might be the answer. I'm not trying to get out of it and put it on somebody else, but it seems to me that that's the road to travel. If he were a Catholic pastor, I'd be happy to talk to him right away.
Matt.
Assalamu alaikum. I use that as a word of peace to everybody. We remember very well, my name is Uthman Itali. I actually am the president of African Heritage International, based in Boston, Massachusetts. I would like to thank the organizers, ISNA and their Interfaith organization. My question goes to the scholars or teachers. As a teacher by profession, I see that we have a challenge. Much as these people did this horrible act of banning the Quran, which is a very clear book, that this is a book which is universal, teaching everybody like discipline and values. So how are we going to help our students in schools where we have so many challenges, as you know very well, that we have had issues like all cases where students have hanged themselves because of they are being attacked by fellow students. So as religious leaders, I would like to request what programs have we put in place to address this, especially in public schools. Thank you.
We did talk, so the question is about students. I think you mean Muslim students who are finding themselves stressed and anxious because of all of this this negative information and attacks on Muslims and Islam. And we know there have been a number of studies over the last number of years that have showed that American Muslim children have highly increased levels of anxiety, depression. There are scientific studies of this, and I'm sure this will increase it. So I think part of the message to the general public is we would like teachers, we would like counselors, healthcare workers, and others who interact with Muslim children who are in the vast majority in public schools to be mindful of that and to try to seek help from the Muslim community, from the interfaith community, for resources on how to manage some of the tensions that may arise in the class, as well as to help the children. You know, it's a pastoral issue. It's a mental health issue. It is, of course, those in counterterrorism would say it's a security issue, because you don't want the majority of the Muslim youth to be alienated from Muslim society. But let me just say, and to direct this to the Muslims around the world who may be listening to this, again, the issue of the Quran burning, yes, it's hurtful. It is a symbolic act that's intended to hurt and offend. Yet, especially during this holy month of Ramadan that we're just finishing, Muslims know that the Quran will not disappear with the burning of a book. It wouldn't disappear with the burning of all of the Qurans in the world, because millions of Muslims across the world have memorized the Quran. They have it in their heart. They live it every day. They refer to it as their source of ethics and compassion. So we as Muslims also need to take a step back, and although we feel hurt, although we're upset, and although we're alarmed by what this might mean, because book burning in history does not have a very good precedent for the rights of people's whose books are burned. I mean, a lot of terrible things have happened after book burnings. So it's alarming. But our community should feel confident that this is, you know, God's word is eternal, and it won't be harmed by fire.
Riley with Talking Points memo.
I'm Welton Gaddy, president of the Interfaith Alliance, and I want to be very specific in responding to what we can teach that will help our children. One, hate is neither a religious nor a democratic value. Two, difference is not a moral category. It's a reality. Diversity is a reality that we can learn to appreciate and from which we can benefit. Thirdly, for Americans, the First Amendment to the Constitution is the best friend that religion has in this nation, because it lets religions thrive without establishing one religion over another. If we could inculcate those three lessons in a curriculum to respond to your question, we'd make tremendous progress.
Next question, who has the mic?
Ryan Riley with Talking Points Memo. I wanted to get a sense of what you think the government's, how you would gauge the government's reaction to this, both at the White House level and I guess also with the Justice Department. How would you gauge their reaction to any hate crimes that have gone on?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about it? Yeah. You want to go ahead? Sure.
Later this afternoon, some of us will be meeting with the Attorney General. I think many of you know about this already. It comes from an earlier meeting that Reverend Gaddy and I were pleased to participate in which we met with the staff over at the Justice Department to talk about, at this crucial moment, the need for there to be a visible response by the government to put together, doing a lot of very effective things. They're prosecuting hate crimes. They are acting with their community service division to work together to help reconcile different groups and to diffuse the kinds of problems that have arisen. And this is true throughout in the housing division in terms of pursuit of the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Protection Act that almost everyone represented here helped write and get through Congress 10 years ago, celebrating its 10th anniversary on September 22nd, to ensure that religious houses of worship are able to be built where their believers need them to be built. And there's a lot that's going on, but it isn't being felt enough. It's a case where the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, and there's a need for more vigorous action right now by the government. And so at the Attorney General's request, we will be meeting with the Attorney General later today in trying to work out what is the most effective way for us to parallel our actions and statements and activities over this next momentous week to try and lift up the clear image that this has no place in American life.
Just a quick comment from Jim Zogby from the Arab American Institute.
I think that the administration handling of this has been appropriate, and I'm pleased that the Attorney General will be meeting with us to talk about it further in the day, later in the day. But I think that, as our statement notes, some political figures have attempted to make this a wedge issue in this election. And while individuals in the Congress, Senator Durbin, for one, and Mayor Bloomberg, the head of mayor of New York City, have made extraordinary statements. Many other political leaders and people running for office in this year's election have been disgraceful and have fueled this fire, and I think have done grave damage to the electorate in how this issue is being framed. And so it's not just a religious issue, it's not just a media issue, it has become a political issue. It should not have become that kind of issue, and I think we need to speak out against that.
And just to add another point, this morning, to talk to the point of the administration, we had one of the persons representing the administration with us with the neighborhood planning and also the White House initiative on faith-based initiatives. And so all of this information has been fed and will be fed to the White House so that they can have a deeper appreciation of the breadth of this body.
Next question? Okay. Where's the mic?
Sarah Posner with Religion Dispatches. Do you think there's been a robust enough pushback or debunking of a lot of the propaganda that perhaps has laid some of the groundwork for this reaction that we're seeing now? I'm thinking of movies like Obsession or Relentless or The Third Jihad, which a lot of Americans have seen and take as truth and might make them more receptive to these messages that they're hearing now. I mean, do you think there's been enough pushback against that and truth-telling about what Islam is really about?
So this is a great question about the response of the Muslim community or others or educators to the distortions about Islam. The reality is that there are very well-funded initiatives to spread misinformation about Islam. It's on the internet, there are these movies, they take a lot of resources, and there are people who are funding these initiatives and these projects. I'll tell you, for the Muslim community, we are finding ourselves so stretched. we're a young community. We're still at the mosque building stage, or trying to build mosques, as you can see, in many communities. Much less, you know, what about schools? What about outreach? To be able to make movies, you know, feature-length movies about Islam or documentary, to have hundreds or dozens of people on the internet making sure that in a Google search something accurate comes up about Islam. You know, we don't have the resources. We've been so focused also on trying to counter extremist messages. We've been asked, if you remember, the last few years, there's been a lot of questioning of the American Muslim community. What are you doing about extremist messages on the internet? What about these people who are trying to lure American Muslims into extremist or militant ideology? You know, this isn't our area of expertise. We're trying to figure out how to even, you know, organize our web pages so that something good comes up when someone goes on and Googles Islam or jihad or something like this. So we're really stretched, and we haven't been able to offer a robust enough response because we don't have the resources. But it really shouldn't be only our responsibility. I mean, when there are so many so-called experts about Islam on, I have to really select television here as the, you know, main place, but these are people who have no expertise, no academic credentials, no true institutional representation. You know, if you go to the American Academy of Religion Study of Islam section or the Middle East Studies Association, there are hundreds of professors in the United States who are experts on the Middle East, on Islam, on Muslims. They are completely neglected. Maybe they're not charismatic enough for TV. Maybe they're not, you know, I don't know. But really, it isn't all of our responsibility, you know, only our responsibility to have accurate information out. There are resources available. There are people available. There are excellent books that are available. And so there needs to be a bit more of a partnership between the people who have the accurate information and those who are lifting up who is an expert on Islam in the general media. Yeah.
Rabbi Steve Gutow, the president of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. You know, listening to Professor Mattson caused me to want to stand up and say, it's not just movies like Obsession. It's not just what is the theology of Islam. It is significant. It is no longer an option to be silent. It was in our statement. It's important to understand it. And those of us who perhaps have been not silent, but too quiet, are now understanding the need that we must stand up. And when we see these lies being told, when we see this bias being spread all over the country, we have to stand up, not only academics, not only thinkers, but also just common people that said, as many of the people with me today said, this is not the America that we all have grown to love and care about. This isn't the America that we came from. This isn't the America we're going to accept. So it's an end to silence now. It's not an option anymore. And whether or not it be in any sphere at all, those of us who care about this country, we have learned that we have to stand up for our Muslim brothers and sisters and say, this is not okay. That's really what I wanted to answer to you.
While we are really celebrating that our partners from different faith organizations and denominations are here on this very important summit, we want to tell you that Islamic Society of North America has been consistently, continuously involved at the grassroots level. We are working with these leaders through their grassroots organizations, synagogues, churches, and so on. For example, we have a program with the Jewish community, several programs. One we have jointly with the Union of Reformed Judaism, which has involved Islamic centers and synagogues, bringing together the congregations and discussing Islam and discussing Judaism from jointly in that sense. And it has created lot of new literature, lot of new understanding, and lot of partnerships at that level. Similarly, we have been celebrating every year for the last several years twinning, bringing together Muslim organizations, that's Islamic centers, mosques, and Jewish organizations. We have during that one weekend together the imams and rabbis, Muslims and Jews and Christians, they condemn Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. So this has also developed tremendous understanding and bridge building at the grassroots level. We invited these imams and rabbis from different European countries. For them, it was a new experience because Europe is even far behind in this. The successful integration of Muslims in America has become a model for the rest of the world, for Europe in particular. European governments are sending their people, their delegations and leaders here to study how these things have been achieved. So similarly with our National Council of Churches at grassroots level, we have in different cities and states where you have state councils of churches and Islamic organizations jointly working. That's what we have today in Gainesville. The Islamic centers there and the different churches and synagogues together have forged a strong relationship. And during this whole month, they have been preparing their people, giving more lessons, giving more programs in interfaith dialogues and bridge building. So just Gainesville itself has become robust in terms of interfaith dialogue. And this ugly act that is going to be performed there, it is nothing in comparison. The love and respect and appreciation that has been initiated, because it's wonderful that this is the month of Ramadan. Muslims are so much motivated and directed to express their compassion and their self-discipline. And in this, it's amazing to see how these different religious groups at the grassroots level, the mosque and the synagogues and these are getting together. Thank you.
And that was Dr. Sayyid Muhammad Saeed, who's the National Director of the Office of Interfaith and Community Alliances of the Islamic Society of North America.
Dr. Mattson?
Yes.
Hi, it's Lori Goodstein with the New York Times.
Hi, Lori.
Hi. I know you say in your statement that people of good conscience can have different positions on the Park 51 mosque near Ground Zero, the Muslim Community Center, and I know that this statement is not explicitly about that. And yet there are going to be very many people who want to know how you as religious leaders stand on that. Did you attempt to come to consensus on that question? Did you decide to avoid it, and why? And is there anything that you can say affirmatively about how, as a group, what position you take on that?
Okay. We really felt the reason we were meeting here today, we felt was much bigger than that particular issue. We didn't discuss it other than to say the reason that we're meeting is that what happened because of that or around that, or using that as an excuse for this intensifying of anti-Muslim rhetoric and hate crimes against Muslims. So it wasn't our focus today. I have no idea what the opinions are of the people in the room, unless they've made public statements about it. Okay, one more question.
Is this on?
Then we'll need to close.
Alex Trevino, WUSA. It's CBS here in Washington. I church hop. I have many friends from different religions, cultures, heritages. Do you think there needs to be a more concerted effort with our religious leaders to promote diversification and embrace the different points of view and belief in a church setting, ministering and preaching, as opposed to this is the way it should be? You don't follow these ways, you don't pray this way, bad things happen. More of a unity. Hey, your friend across the street is a good person.
Well, I have sympathy with ministers and pastors and others who lead congregations because I teach them in my job at Hartford Seminary, and I know it's difficult enough to get the attention of the congregation for 1 hour a week just to hear a very basic message about their own faith. So I know that it's challenging for congregational leaders to integrate other messages into their, their weekly sermons or into their teaching. But it's not an option anymore. We live in a world in which we are neighbors with people of all different faiths. And we have to know what our own traditions say about those other people. That is part of our religious education. What do you, as a Christian or a Jew, as a Muslim, believe about those other people? What does your religion say about how you should treat them, how you should speak to them, about what rights they have? So this has to be part of our teaching, and it's one of the reasons why ISNA has done the kind of curriculums that he mentioned. Our community, it's important that our community really understands at least the basics of Judaism so they don't distort the beliefs of their neighbors. That Christians similarly understand just some basic things about their Muslim neighbors so that they at least are not, and this is a phrase you've heard a number of times, bearing false witness. This is a violation of one of the commandments, to bear false witness. Also in Islam, it's a sin to bear false witness. We have to at least say what is true about the other. And if we don't know, then we should find out through, legitimate and reliable sources. So I do think that there are many religious leaders who are struggling to find ways to do this education. It's difficult because many people don't get their information even about their own religion from their own preacher. They go to the internet and try to find information. So we're all kind of struggling with the new ways that people get information about anything, including their faith or their ethics these days, and we're doing the best we can to catch up with that reality.
Roy Medley, General Secretary, American Baptist Churches. I share with Dr. Madsen the concern and the compassion for local pastors with regard to your question. Some of the most offensive statements about Islam, unfortunately, have come forth from the Baptist community. And therefore, some of us as Baptist leaders felt that it was important for us to join with ISNA and with our Muslim brothers and sisters in order to put together a program that would help us with this very issue in our local congregations of understanding other faiths, as in this particular point, the Islamic faith, in order that we might live out our Baptist values of religious liberty. We were born of persecution as Baptists in England and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it was for that reason that Roger Williams founded Rhode Island as a Baptist guaranteeing religious liberty for the first time in a geographical political unit in human history. And so that value is very dear to us. We cannot uphold that unless we teach our people what that means and the respect for one another, while also adhering to our own faith and understanding that deeply and practicing it.
Just a final word.
Let me address your question because I am a pastor as well as president of the Interfaith Alliance, pastor in Monroe, Louisiana. Monroe, Louisiana is not the hotbed of liberalism in this nation. But I would not say anything here that I would not say in the pulpit in that congregation. And there is the implication that if you're going to talk about interfaith relations or interreligious cooperation, that's an addendum to what you ought to be talking about. Christians would say is the gospel, others would say is their faith. And that's a fallacy. It's not an addendum. It's at the very heart of what we're talking about. So if someone in our congregation says you need to be preaching the gospel, We are preaching the gospel. It's not exclusive. It's inclusive. It's not about hate. It's about love. You have to understand, please, that the people standing here right now, are not doing this in spite. We're doing it because of our individual faiths. This is what religion is all about.
Hi. Walter Ruby, Foundation for Ethnic Understanding. My agency, headed by Rabbi Mark Schneier and Russell Simmons, has the honor to be doing the twinning program, Twinnings of Mosques and Synagogues, together with ISNA. And the one point I wanted to make was simply how incredibly important it is to build those human contacts, that why twinning, why all the kinds of best practices we're talking about here are so incredibly vital. When people get to know each other, when Jews go into a mosque, when Muslims come into a synagogue for the first time, and many of them come in, Jews into the mosque the first time, or Muslims into a synagogue, apprehensive. What's going to happen to me there? Maybe there's terrorists there. You hear crazy stuff, but they don't come out the same way they came in. They come out excited, inspired. They come out having been hugged, having been, connected, having seen Islam being practiced, having seen Judaism being practiced. So it's just so incredibly important that we build those kind of human contacts in this atmosphere. Thank you.
I wanted to say as a pastor that what you're seeing before you today is the simple word communication. And communication is predicated upon three things which we've attempted to exemplify today. One is understanding. We must understand each other. Second is respect. And third, trust. If we can understand each other, respect each other, and trust each other, we can accomplish the goals that you see outlined on the sheet. Thank you.
Well, we need to end now. Thank you all for being here. And there will be some people waiting around, I think, who you can interview. Thank you very much.
Where we need a very clear statement from the Attorney General, from the President, from leaders of each branch of the relevant divisions of the administration about their unwillingness to accept for a moment the kind of intolerance, the kind of hate crimes, the kind of victimization of the Muslim community that we've seen. We think it can help turn the tide of opinion in America of what is heard. In other words, we know the vast majority of Americans find what this anti-Muslim rhetoric and hate crimes repugnant. But we need the leaders of the country to speak out, along with the religious. We need the political leaders of the community to speak out along with the religious leaders of the community to make it clear that is so empower everyone who cares about this issue to speak out, to denounce this kind of intolerance.
How has the DOJ reacted previously to, I guess, incidents of anti-Jewish hate crimes?
Well, they've been consistent about anti-Muslim hate crimes, anti-Jewish hate crimes against any group. They've been vigorous about prosecuting them. They have helped under the new Hate Crimes Act to work with local law enforcement officials, giving them training and are able to do investigative work that greatly strengthens their effectiveness in prosecuting hate crimes. And their community reconciliation service works with communities whenever problems of religious intolerance rises up. So they're doing a lot of good work. The problem is too few Americans know about it, and the image isn't always what the reality is. And that's why we're asking them to speak out more forcefully at this moment.
Okay, so you think the problem isn't so much on the hate crime side as is on just speaking out as a moral voice, for the administration putting...
Exactly. Okay. It's exactly to let people know. If anyone engages in hate crimes, it will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law by the government. They're doing it, they will do it, they will continue to do it, and to make that known to the country.
Great, thanks a lot.
Questions about plans by a Florida church to burn copies of the Koran were part of the State Department briefing Tuesday. This portion is 15 minutes.